So, hi everyone. My name is Patrick Darko. I'm a graduate student at McGill University, and I'm being supervised by Professor Margaret Kalaska and Dr. Pablo Arroyo-Mora. So, I'm very interested in hyperspectral imagery applications in forest ecosystem assessment. So, today I'll be talking to you about spectral complexity metric, an idea that I've been working on using hyperspectral imagery. So, globally, biodiversity has changed and may continue to change. But our ability to monitor these changes is limited due to the large geographic scale in which these measurements are required. But thanks to advancement in remote sensing systems, such as hyperspectral imaging systems, we have the opportunity to map these changes in our forest ecosystem with our airborne platform systems or even the satellite systems. With regards to hyperspectral imaging, we have the advantage of collecting hundreds of contiguous images at different wavelengths that covers the same spatial area that allows us to do this kind of analysis at different scales. For instance, from the global scale to even the regional scale, and even to landscape or local scale, like the Mount St. Bruno National Park. So with this image collection, as I mentioned, this contains a lot of information on the chemical and physical state of the surface material, and it allows us to be able to develop methods to extract this kind of information from the data set. However, the development of methods that harness these abundant spectral information that is associated with hyperspectral imagery is still at the initial stage. So in this study, a new method based on the spectral diversity hypothesis is tested on a full range hyperspectral imagery. And at the time that we were testing this, the Mount St. Bruno dataset was not ready. So we tested it on a different set of hyperspectral dataset in Costa Rica that I'll be showing in the next slide. So the optical diversity idea is essentially has to do with the variation in spectral reflectance across set of pixels that can be correlated to conventional metrics of biodiversity. So if we adapt some known measures of complexity, that is mean information gain and marginal entropy, to hyperspectral data, it is possible to quantify two spectral complexity metrics. And these are spectral reflectance, spatial heterogeneity, and spectral reflectance, spatial heterogeneity. So by spectral complexity measure, we are looking at a measure that distinguishes classes of spectral reflectance dynamics along a gradient of order. In this case, referring to less variable reflectance, to disorder, referring to highly variable reflectance. So we can classify spectral complexity as a type 1 measure, which basically assigns the highest value of complexity to the highly variable reflectance, in this case, which we are calling disordered system. So what that is mean information gain. And MIG actually provides us an estimate of the spatial heterogeneity of the reflectance in the landscape being studied, whilst the marginal entropy provides us an estimate of the aspatial spectral heterogeneity, which is the essentially the probability of observing reflectance value independent of its position in the image. So considering these two images, this image on your screen, this actually refers to two distinct ecosystems, which is mangrove forest and terrestrial forest. So we can say that the mangrove forest has less varied vegetation types, and we can say that terrestrial forest has highly varied vegetation types. So what does the spectral information also tells us? When we examine, let's say, one wavelength like 449, and then we can say that the mangrove actually has a low spectral reflectance heterogeneity compared to the forest, which has a high spectral reflectance heterogeneity, which means that if we adapt, if we complete the spectral complexity metric for mangrove, is going to be we're going to record a lower value for the mangrove, and we're going to record a higher value for the forest. The same if we examine for different bands, we see similar trend. And if we examine for this band also, we can also say that they're kind of comparable. So the estimate that we're going to get is going to be comparable. So we have our reflectance data cube. So we can now transform this reflectance data set into a measure of spectral complexity with a spectral profile that looks like what is shown on the panel 2, whereby the black line actually shows the mean information gain profile, and the red line shows the marginal entropy. So we can ask three basic questions. With it, after the transformation, then we want to know how does this spectral complexity metric compares with the already existing vegetation indices and spectral signatures for discriminating, let's say, mangrove extent from terrestrial forest on a landscape scale, and how can this metric actually help us separate species, and also can this metric help us to model some forest attributes. And to apply to test it, as I mentioned, we tested it on a data set in Costa Rica, and the image on my left is actually the CASI data, which records from the visible to near infrared region, and the image on my right is actually the SASI data set, which records from within the Shortwave-Infrared region. So the first question we are asking is, does spectral complexity metric improve the classification performance of forest and mangrove extent? To answer this question, we transform our hyperspectral data set into a measure of spectral complexity. Then we extract the data points and train different light classification. The maps you see in your screen is with a map that was developed with mean information gain and marginal entropy data set. So then we compare the classification performance of each of these metrics. And what we are seeing is that if we transform the reflectance data, we actually improve the classification accuracy of the forest extent. So now that we've been able to delineate the extent of the mangrove, now we can say that we can narrow down into the mangrove ecosystem and now to test these metrics and how they can predict species within the landscape. So the map on your right, it actually is a map that was developed with ground truth data sets. So for instance, the dark green that you see here is actually pointing to Rhizophora racemosa, and also the green that you see here actually pointing to Pellicera rhizophora, and the other colors actually represent different species distributions. So what we did was to extract 3 pure stands of mangrove and 2 mixed and 1 forest class. And the question we are asking here is that how different are the species spectrally? So to answer this question, we implemented forward feature selection on the reflectance dataset and the other metrics, and we compare the classification accuracy. So the first set of results that I want to show here is the feature selection results. So we actually did this for comparing just the combination of all the classes, that is just the 6 classes. We are seeing that on the y-axis here is showing the separability value. So what we are interested in is getting a better separability value, that and also the number of bands also on the y-axis. So from this, what we are seeing is that the CASI actually separates all the 6 classes better than the SASI data set. And also after the transformation, we see a different trend. We see that after the transformation, the number of bands actually reduced and the separability value slightly improves. But then the SASI transformation didn't actually help much. Using the optimal bands from these preprocessing steps, we then trained multiple classifiers and now compare the classification accuracy of these different metrics. And the metrics, what is actually shown is that the spectral complexity metric, when you compare it with the reflectance data set and the vegetation indices at the same scale, the metric actually outperforms the reflectance and vegetation indices. So now the last question we're asking is, can the spectral complexity metric actually predict forest attributes? And to answer this question also, we took ground truth data set on the ground and tried to predict species richness with the spectral complexity metric within the forest. And what we are finding is that this metric could be promising in terms of predicting species richness. And also, we also attempted modeling above biomass with these metric, and we have seen that it could be a promising metric for predicting these kind of attributes. So the main message here that I want to put across is that if we transform the reflectance data, we improve the separability of the mangrove and forest extent. And also putting all the 6 classes together, the spectral complexity metric actually outperforms the reflectance data set and the vegetation list, all of them at the same scale. But then, and also this metric has also shown to be a promising metric for modeling forest attributes. So going forward, I'm looking forward to test these ideas on the Munson Bruno data set in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand. So Crystal has the question. Go on, Crystal.
Keep losing my microphone. Patrick, that was a really good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's fun to see you working on the Costa Rican data. I actually first met Margaret and Pablo because I was interested in some of these flights. You should probably, if you care, there's been some recent LiDAR Elvis flights over Costa Rica from 2019 that you might want to explore. NASA Elvis flights, which would give you some LiDAR contributions.
Okay, great. I'll be interested to try that as well. Thank you very much.
So does someone else have a question?
I have a question for, so have you tried, Patrick, to compare some different, I mean, so this is one type of spectral diversity metrics. I mean, Isla had actually something in the chat where she was interested in which metrics we should use. So it looks like yours has a lot of promise. So have you tried to compare different ways of quantifying spectral heterogeneity within an area and see if yours explain better, for example, species richness on the ground? And
yeah, it's something that I would definitely love to look into. I have not currently like tested it, and I think going forward it will be an interesting thing to actually look into it.